Hello YouTube. Roger here. What you see before you is a Led Zeppelin iceberg chart courtesy of 4LF_0M53 on Reddit. Today I will provide a walkthrough for the chart and explain all relevant points. I hope you enjoy and remember to like and comment. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. To start off, above the iceberg, we have Stairway to Heaven. There's probably no point in explaining this one. Next is the song Remains the Same live album. It is an album notable for being the only official live album released on behalf of the band until the 2000s. Squeeze My Lemon is a tongue-in-cheek lyric uttered by singer Robert Plant in the Lemon Song, a track off of the group's second album. This humorous innuendo was stolen from pre-war blues artists. And if you think that's bad, you probably don't want to know how many more of Zeppelin's songs were also quote-unquote borrowed from older blues artists. Whole Lotta Love was one of the band's early singles, and today the song remains the same, wink wink, as one of their rather well-known tracks. Drummer John Bonham was one of the many rockers of his era who partied themselves straight to hell. More on that later on in the video. Unfortunately, after his death, the band agreed they could not continue on without their longtime drummer, and they broke up soon afterwards. But maybe it was a good thing, because the rock industry was starting to shift towards punk and new wave music, and the band was starting to look washed up by still playing the blues in the late 70s. Okay, sorry for rambling on. Before we continue, I'd like to say congratulations on making it this far in the video. If you've made it this far, please consider liking and commenting. Now, on to the tip of the iceberg. Does anybody remember laughter is a humorous comment often ad-libbed in by Robert Plant during live renditions of Stairway to Heaven? If you want to experience this yourself, you can listen to the song Remains the Same live album I referenced prior. BBC Sessions is a compilation album released in the late 90s which includes recordings taken during the band's early days. Most of the songs can be found on the band's studio albums though, and the audio quality is worse on this album, so don't worry about listening to it unless you are a serious fan. 2007 Reunion was a one-off performance by the surviving members of the band. John Bonham's son Jason Bonham drummed for this concert instead of John because John took a drive on the highway to hell, as I said earlier. Untitled refers to the band's fourth album, which has some of the band's most famous songs, like Stairway and Black Dog. Most people refer to the album as Led Zeppelin 4, but the album in fact has no official name. Thor Ragnarok was a movie that came out a few years ago. One of the songs in the soundtrack is Immigrant Song, the opening track from Led Zeppelin 3. This caused a bunch of Zoomers to discover Led Zeppelin and subsequently flood the song's comments section on YouTube. Greta Van Fleet is a band that got famous for releasing Highway Tune, which was a decent song, but they blatantly ripped off the sound of Led Zeppelin. This also caused a Zoomer influx, albeit not as big as the one caused by the Thor Ragnarok saga. Congratulations on making it to sea level. Now grab your snorkel and diving gear because we're about to take the plunge. The Immigrant Song. To be honest, I do not know what this point is referring to. Hopefully this does not harm my credibility for the rest of this presentation. With that said, let's move on to bass drum triplets. This is something John Bonham did on his drum set. He was known for doing complicated rhythms and sometimes even used 4 sticks instead of 2 to do this. Okay, I admit triplets aren't that complicated to do. But he was a master of rhythm, just trust me bro. Achilles' Last Stand is the opening song from the band's worst-selling album, Presence. A lot of people say this song is really good despite being on a mediocre album, but you'll have to listen to it yourself if you want to find out whether these rumors are true. The object refers to a strange black object that can be observed on the cover art of recently mentioned album Presence. No one knows what this object is, but the family depicted on the album cover seems to be very interested in it. Coda is an album released shortly after Bonham's death which consists of outtakes from throughout the band's entire career. You'd think it would be a really long album, but it wasn't, because almost everything the band wrote had already been put on a studio album prior. Swan Song is an instrumental outtake from the band's 6th studio album Physical Graffiti. The song is good and should have been on the album, but hey, that is just my opinion. Karak Plant was the son of Robert Plant, who died later on in the band's career of a mysterious illness. This inspired Plant to write All of My Love, which is one of their most famous songs today. Monty Python. Recently it was revealed that Led Zeppelin and a few other bands of the time helped to fund the comedy group Monty Python, which is strange, but the investment did pay off because the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail is now a cult classic. Heroin addiction refers to the frequent taking of heroin by guitarist Jimmy Page. This got bad in the middle of the band's career and might explain why the album Presence kind of sucks. But trust me, Jimmy wasn't addicted to heroin. He could have stopped any time he wanted. Vodka is a substance that many rockers choose to indulge in. John Bonham was one of them, and if you were wondering what exactly caused his death, this is your hint. Car crash. Not only did singer Robert Plant lose his son, but he also almost died in a car crash, and this took a long time for him to recover from. But his voice was kind of getting worse by then, so not having a singer wasn't that huge of a loss for the band. Page and Plant was a band formed in the 80s by guitarist Jimmy Page and singer Robert Plant. John Paul Jones wasn't in the group, but he was a bassist, so they probably didn't need him around anyway. Congratulations on making it to the deep zone. If you've made it this far underwater, please consider hitting the subscribe button on my channel. Now let's get right back into it. Live Aid refers to a benefit concert held in 1985. It was a big deal and watched by billions of people around the world. Led Zeppelin had their first big reunion there, with two drummers filling in for Bonham, because he was that good. But unfortunately the band was either too washed up or too drugged out, and they absolutely butchered all their songs and embarrassed themselves in front of the whole world. Keith Moon refers to the drummer of the same name for the band known as The Who. Keith Moon was the one who coined the term Led Zeppelin, because when he heard that those four ragtag rockers were going to form a new band, he said it was going to go down like a lead balloon, a Led Zeppelin, in fact. 10 Ribs and All, full name 10 Ribs and All Pod, is an outtake from previously mentioned album Presence. It mainly features John Paul Jones playing piano. Like I said, being a bassist he would need to learn more instruments or the band wouldn't need him around. Them Crooked Vultures is a band John Paul Jones joined in the 2000s. The reason this is listed in the deep waters is probably because most fans care least about John Paul Jones, because like I said, he is a bass player. Fire Say You're Gonna Leave Me is an unreleased and unfinished song from the recording sessions for the band's final studio album In Through the Outdoor. It sounds pretty sloppy, which is probably why it wasn't included on the Coda album I mentioned earlier. Now I hope you've brought your reinforced diving submarine, because we're about to enter the Twilight Zone. Mudshark refers to a rumored interaction between the band, a groupie, and bits of a shark. However, I cannot go into further detail on this topic because I do not want this video to be taken down from YouTube. Lori Maddox was a groupie who guitarist Jimmy Page dated for a while when she was circa 14 or 15 years old. A lot of people hate Jimmy Page for this reason, but to be honest it's fairly common knowledge, which makes me wonder why it is listed in the deep zone. 18 Days to Record Presents referred to the rushed schedule the band faced when recording their 7th album. This wasn't helped by the fact that Jimmy wasn't there half of the time because he was always hanging out with Mr. Brownstone. John Paul Jones leaving the band refers to the fact that he wasn't exactly cut out for the hard rock lifestyle like the rest of the band was. In fact, John Paul Jones was more of a family man, which is kind of confusing once you ask yourself how a basser would even be in the position to find a wife and start a family to begin with. Thankfully John Paul Jones decided to stay in the band, which is good because he ended up giving us masterpieces like the previously mentioned Carrot Pod. Sandy Denny refers to a woman of the same name who did a duet with Robert Plant on the song The Battle of Evermore off of the band's untitled 4th album. This is the only time a guest vocalist ever appeared on a Led Zeppelin song, which is unfortunate because later on in the band's career Robert could have used the help hitting the high notes. Led Zeppelin refers to the humorous comment brought up by the drummer Keith Moon that I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately Keith Moon kind of embarrassed himself because Led Zeppelin became a much bigger band than The Who was, but that is a topic for a different video. Thank you for watching my Led Zeppelin iceberg commentary video. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day and I'll catch you on the flip side. Roger out.